Alright, so starting off here, this is without ray tracing on. This is the high preset. We are at 1440p, but with FSR 2.1 set to quality. This is how I normally play the game. It's very fast, it's very responsive, it feels really smooth. I don't know exactly what the frame rate is because I don't have it up, and honestly, it's not that big of a concern to me. If the game is, if the game is smooth and it feels responsive, I don't really care if it's, 80 frames per second or 100, for example. Typically, that doesn't really matter to me. It's very fast, it's very smooth. It looks really good. I'm surprised how many of the lights look like they're bouncing off surfaces. I know it's fake. It's not ray trace lighting. So we're going to see how much better it looks and how much worse it runs when we switch over to ray tracing. So here we go in the settings. I'm going to show you. We are at 1440p. Everything's on high, except for we have all the ray tracing things turned on. We got the reflections, the shadows, and the lighting all turned on. This is pushing an AMD 6750 XT out of its comfort zone. The AMD cards are not as good at ray tracing compared to their NVIDIA counterparts. And so I knew this wasn't going to run great, but to be honest, I think it's running better than I was expecting. It's playable mostly. I wouldn't want to play it like this. Like, it does feel sluggish. You can feel it's definitely not as responsive. It would be harder to... Certainly it would be harder if I was in a gunfight. But even driving around, it's not as responsive. But it's not like... I don't know. It's not as bad as I was expecting. This game has a lot of motion blur, so when the frame rate's really low, the motion blur really kind of exaggerates itself, so it makes it maybe harder to tell exactly. But like if it's running at like 24 frames per second or even 20, maybe, I wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, it is playable. Some of the reflections, sure, they look a little bit better. Some of the lighting, I guess, does look a little bit better, but I don't know, does it look that much better? That's the thing with ray tracing, that like in a lot of instances you put them side by side and it's like, yeah, look, it looks a little better, I guess, maybe. Sometimes it looks worse, and that's because like it might be more accurate to real life. But the, baked lighting or whatever you want to call it, the rasterized lighting, I don't know, it can look more artistic sometimes. But, regardless, I guess you would say, yeah, it probably looks a little better most of the time, but I don't know, does it look that much better most of the time? I think the screen space reflections back without the ray tracing were surprisingly good most of the time. And again, I was surprised how some of that lighting did bounce around, or not bounce around, but look like it was, affecting the area around it. But yeah, I don't know. Again, I'm surprised it's running this well, to be honest. I thought it was going to be like 10 frames per second, but it's definitely running better than that, but maybe 20.